Welcome to the Ruins podcast. I'm Räйchel Sэгer, owner, creator, and chief idea maker of the Ruins Project, an always in progress mosaic museum in the woods of Appalachia, a former coal mine operation that has come back to life in stone and glass and ceramic to tell the story of the people who come from coal. Hundreds of mosaic artists, from the deepest lake in the world in southern Siberia to the famous mosaic school in Spilimbergo, Italy, to a portrait carried in a suitcase from Russia to Argentina to Whitsett. Ruins lovers bring their skills and stories to the tiny patch town of Whitsett in Fayette County, Pennsylvania. These special people sit down with me to share their thoughts amidst what is now the no longer abandoned walls of a happily no longer forgotten coal mine. Adelaïda Rosh, a young, uber-talented Russian artist, did the Ruins and me the great honor of accepting the challenge for the portrait of Charles Paul Verba, the 23-year-old miner who was killed the day after Christmas, 1941, after filling in for a man who had called off work that day. I consider her portrait to be one of the best examples of world-class mosaic that we have here on the walls. Just a few days after we recorded this episode, I got a surprise visit from Mr. Verba's nephew, who he was named for and bears great resemblance to. I took Chuck over to see the portrait and hear his family's versions and memories of the uncle he never got to meet. The Ruins magic at work, and possibly a future guest. We shall see. So many of the fascinating people I invite to these conversations are first-time podcast guests. What does that tell you? It tells me that these episodes I am recording are important. They are tapping into a group of people, whether they are mosaicists or the people who descend from the coal industry. They are voices that need to be heard. The podcast format is extremely effective communication. I would argue that it has become more powerful than the TV. Think about that while you listen today. I like Adelаида. I like that term for Teссera as little sculptures. I think we should adopt that. I think that's beautiful. Each Tessera is a little sculpture unto itself. Sometimes I've said over the years that each Tessera is a work of art in itself, depending on what your material is. Like I consider small t each piece to be a work of art because there are little imperfections in them. And a stone, of course, is always a work of art. Something else that I think you've mentioned before too, and you've heard it, I think, from Annabella Wawur. I heard it from Verdiona Marzi myself, but the idea that as a mosaic artist who uses the hammer to cut a stone, that moment, that beautiful, beautiful moment when you're cutting a stone in half and you're witnessing a piece of geology that has been covered and encased, in itself for thousands and thousands of years, and you, as the mosaic artist, get to witness that. That's a very miraculous feeling.
It's amazing. I've read this the thing on Annabella Weaver's website, and it inspired me so much that I created the whole work that was about this thing.
Was it an abstract? Or?
Yeah, abstract. I call it a heart of stone, because each time you cut the stone, you see the heart of stone that nobody's seen before.
Beautiful. Really the inside, the heart. Love that. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about how we met, and actually we're just kind of meeting now because we've never really, spoken face to face. This has all been through Instagram direct message for 2 years now, 2 or 3 years maybe even. I can't remember if you reached out to me or if I reached out to you, but I knew that you loved what's happening at the Ruins, and you may have said something about being a part of it somehow. And I'm very careful when I first start talking to an artist about not pushing them too hard in one direction necessarily, and letting them make up their own mind and going with their instinct or their intuition, because I want whatever they do to feel right to them. So I remember asking you about what you would like to do, and you did a really quick sketch of a tree. I think, was it a tree?
Yeah, it was a tree. I remember it was a tree in a circle, and like the
Yes.
background was white and the tree was golden. Also, it was something I thought about, like when I was thinking about minds. Yeah.
Yeah, and the circle, which I'm sure are very aware of, the circle being a repetitive theme of the ruins. The circle just keeps repeating itself.
I
But then
love
I
the.
threw, yeah, yeah, and then I threw a wild card at you, and I said, "Well, what about a portrait?"
I remember it.
Yeah, and because I know, I have seen your portraiture work already, and knew that you would rock something like that. And uh, one of my challenges as the owner and idea maker at the ruins is that there aren't that many. There are many less portrait artists in mosaic as there are other people who can do other things. The portraitures, are a much more narrow group of people. So when I find one, I zero in on them. So I started sending you photos of real people from Whitsett, that the wonderful Jeff Stunya from the Whitsett Historical Society has been cataloging for years and years, and the tireless work that he has done for documenting the people of the Banning 2 coal mine has helped me, have those photos at my fingertips. So I sent you maybe like 6 or 7, and real quickly, all in a row, and it was the last one, of course, that you zeroed in on, and that was Charles Paul Verba, that man who has an Italian look to him, very handsome, beautiful nose, beautiful eyes, and yeah.
Oh, for me, it wasn't a hard choice. I remember that you sent me some photos of people who were somehow connected with the story of the ruins. And I've chosen the photo of Charles Verber almost immediately. For me, it was like falling in love. You just see the person and you know it's him. And like, it
Yeah.
was really easy and it was an instinctive choice. And then I found out that the story behind the photo is more than touching, because he died in a coal mine and in his early 20s. So he was such a beautiful, such a gorgeous man. Really, he looks Italian a bit, even though I think he came from Hungary, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But still, it was
Yeah.
like a man whose
It's
life
one.
was extremely short. So it was like really heartbreaking.
Yep.
And yeah,
And one of the things I've been thinking about recently is how luck or bad luck and good luck play into a person's life. That man had bad luck, but there was this little tiny sliver. Now all of these almost maybe he died in 19, I forget, was it 30s? I think it was the 1930s that he died.
yeah,
But that one person who snapped that one photograph of him in that one moment, right? I think about this. That is the reason that I showed you the photo and you responded to the photo, and then you spent the next year creating this incredible work of art. And I will compliment you and say that it is an incredible work of art. I consider it to be one of the best, if not the best mosaic in the ruins. And I'm sorry, but I have to just say that. You're just gonna have to take that compliment, honey. But that moment in time when that one person snapped that photograph, that's why that mosaic is here, because that person did that and captured his beauty and the bittersweetness of knowing that he died so early and didn't get to have children. There's just so much wrapped up in one image.
yeah, it's true. As for me, I often find inspiration for my works in different social phenomena. And for me, it's very, I was fascinated by idea that it's like immortalizing the person, like making his portrait in mosaic. It means like to make something that it will last for years, for centuries maybe. And for me, it's like, it's even important, to take a picture of a simple person who didn't have chance to leave a lot behind in the world because like he passed away so young. And it's even more important than to make some famous people who will stay in history anyway, because it's like a small man and you give him a chance to stay like immortal maybe. So I find it really beautiful.
I couldn't agree more. It's more important to immortalize someone that everyone has forgotten or no one even got a chance to know. That's actually more important than making a famous person. I completely agree. Yeah, that's what what the Ruins is all about.
Exactly.
Is that
it's the thing that exactly excites me the most about the Ruins project, because you managed to make the history of the place truly alive and authentic. And I like this idea of the story told. So it's like you see all the mosaics and you can read the story of this place by seeing it. Because without these mosaics, people maybe they see some ruins, not their ruins, but ruins, and they don't think about the place. Like they don't understand that there are so many lives which are behind the place. And so you make this place more real than it was before. I really like it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my life's work. No doubt about that.
It's important.
There's so many things to talk about. This little portrait, is it life? It's a little bit smaller than life size, right? Would you say, or is it? Would
I
you say
think
his face?
I believe it's close to the real size.
Close
Yeah.
to the real size, yeah. Um, Before we talk about his journey to get here, which is a story in itself, of course, could you talk a little bit about how you work with a portrait? I mean, one of the things for me that I never get tired of looking at, because I get to go over and see him every day, is the beautiful flesh tones, the nuance. I mean, that's the word I would say for the way you put his face together of the. I mean, I'm trying to name some of the flesh tone colors. I mean, it's not just whites, but there's a little bit of rosiness in his cheeks, and I don't know. It's just so good. It is. And you shared your process as you worked, and especially on Instagram. You had the sketch of the lines of his face, and then you worked over top of that over plastic. So, you want to talk a little bit about how you put a portrait together?
It's a classical Spielberger technique, honestly, because portraiture is one of the things that they teach how to do. And each time you start with an andamento. So you make all these lines like that define the face. And then you just, I don't know, you start putting tesseras one by one. I don't know what to say about it, because like that's really how it works. But in Spielberg, they always teach you to start with the eyes, because of course eyes are the most important in the portrait. It's like that's the place where there is soul maybe. And
Sure.
if you make eyes real, and if you make them look alive, like the portrait is done, because all the other parts are not that important. And I really love the eyes in the portrait of Charles Werber. So I believe I managed to do them.
Yeah, they're very expressive and sad. I think just those were his eyes. I've seen a couple other photographs of him at different times in his life, and he just had those were his eyes. And your description of creating a world-class portrait is hilarious, Adelaida. Really. This is just how you do it. That's your explanation. I think this is just how you do it. I don't think I would do it that way. I would not be able to do it that way. Your virtuosity in that portrait is stunning, truly.
It's something I love. I believe you can always do the things you like to do. because you're crazy about them. Like you come there, you sit in the studio, and then you do your best. And I believe that's the only thing that you really need. And it's by the way, it's one of the quotes I took from your website. It's like you make mosaic Teссera by Tessera. It's like there is no another way to do it, right? You just put one, then you put another.
One at a time.
That's how it's done.
Yeah. That's a good point. Good point.
I like this idea because it makes things simple. You know, there is this technique, like if you have to solve like a huge problem, and like you call it an elephant, and you have to eat elephant piece by piece. So that's how you can make it.
Eat the elephant. That's a new one. I have not heard that before. Eat the elephant. Oh, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're in Russia. The Ruins is in Pennsylvania, and we need to get this beautiful special portrait, to Witsit safely somehow. And the time that we are living through right now, and just the fact that it would have to be shipped from across the world, that was intimidating, and a little bit we were nervous about that. But you just so happen to have accepted a place in Giulio Manassi's symposium in Argentina last spring, was it? I don't know, I forget when it was exactly, but so you were physically going yourself to Argentina. So it was easier. It was easier for you to go to Argentina than it was to ship this portrait to Pennsylvania. It's crazy. So you put him in your suitcase.
Yeah, exactly. No, I made a good package. Like it was all safe,
Mm-hmm.
And then I put it in a suitcase. Yeah, and I brought him in Argentina, and I was really lucky because at this symposium there was a ruins artist, Adelaïda Weaver, which is amazing. Amazing person, amazing artist.
There were actually two. Actually, there were three ruins artists. I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because originally we were going to have Gila Rayberg pass. You were going to pass him off to her, and Alejandra Martin was also in that group, but she's a ruins artist too. But anyway, go ahead.
Yes, but I remember only the end of the story how Annabella took it.
Annabella, because Gila got sick. Gila got sick and had to leave. Unfortunately, that was very sad. So Annabella picked it up, and
she brought it to Ruins. And I remember she even helped to install it, and I was so happy because when people you really met in person do it for you, it's like it's a wonder.
It was wonderful. So it went from Russia to Argentina to Miami. And I think to the other side of Pennsylvania for a while in her special RV that she drives around, and then eventually she brought it to the Ruins and we installed it together. So yeah, it was quite a journey for that.
Yeah, but it was such a lot because with all these restrictions from coronavirus, and like it became a little bit complicated to ship works without problems. So
right.
Yeah, it was easier to bring. So. It had to travel a little bit.
Well, he's here now, so he is a part of the Ruins. His family, I believe his nephew, and I think it's a direct nephew, like not a great nephew, but his actual nephew, has been to the Ruins before his portrait was here. And I know that they'll be back. They just have not come yet, but I'm sure that the family is going to come to visit. And I'll be sure to let you know when that happens. That'll be an important occasion.
Yeah.
Very important, yeah. But you have a lot of other things going on, Adelaida, besides just this, portrait for the Ruins. You have you're prolific. You're creating a lot of art. You're also working with teaching. A group of people in your country, not just your country, but other places too. It's called Expert-Chat, right? That's the name of it.
Yes, it's a place where we try to gather some different mosaic artists, mainly Russian-speaking mosaic artists, honestly, because it's easier to make it in one language. But we
Right.
gather them in one chat. It's like a community right now. We have around 50 members, and it's about teaching, also about supporting in some technical problems, in some, I don't know, even giving moral support is sometimes important, because you know how it's hard to start doing something, especially like mosaic isn't an easy art, because like it's not enough to make it beautiful. It's also important to make it last forever. Because like there are some always there are some problems with I don't know, the right glue you use, some materials. And so in this community also we teach, we support each other, and we make some podcasts where we talk to different people who is connected to mosaic somehow. And also we talk about contemporary artists. We had a podcast about your works. I remember. Yeah,
Really?
about the Roots
Oh my
project,
good.
of course, because it's important. It's one of the
Oh my goodness.
important projects in contemporary mosaic art.
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that. I did not know. I'm just plugging away over here with this podcast, and I didn't know that. So I can't listen to that because this is a closed group membership. So the people who invest in the membership are the ones that get to hear it, which is very important. You know, you have to make a living, and then that's clearly part of you making a living. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think there may be a few that anybody can watch on YouTube here
Yeah,
and
there are
there,
some.
right?
Yeah, yeah, but they're all in Russian. So it's also important to me.
Oh, they're all in. Well, we can watch. We can. Yeah, it might still be interesting
Subtitles,
to check
maybe.
to check out. Yeah, yeah. We had an interesting visitor a couple weeks ago, just out of the blue, Oksana, who is Ukrainian, and she and her partner Bear visited the ruins and took the official tour. And Erica, led them all through, and she got to see your portrait. But she's in this membership, right?
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
in
It was
in
one
this
of my
group.
students also. Yeah, but we met in person in St. Petersburg. I was given a course of color theory in mosaic, and then that's how we met. And then she moved to the USA, and I think she's moving to some other place now. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
she's in New York right now, but they might be moving to Australia or something.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're
something
they're
like that.
movers and shakers, definitely. They got around, yeah. But it was
Yeah.
really really cool to meet someone who knows you, and have that connection. It was very very interesting. Yeah. Um, how about there's a project that you worked on, which I love the title of. The title just totally tickles my head. Birds are also people. I love that.
It's such a nice project. It's was I moved to Novosibirsk from St. Petersburg 2 years ago, and this project was the first thing I've done in my native city, because I wanted to do something special, like to do something big, maybe. And I found another mosaic artist. I found out that there are another mosaic artist in Novosibirsk. It was surprising because I didn't know that. And her name is Galina Mashneva. And we decided to make, we call it like a city project. It's like a project when you don't do mosaic, you do some sketch, and then you invite people to make mosaic, and then you like install something big, because there are a lot of people who made it. And birds are also people. The idea was really poetic, because we had 300 people who came to our studios, and each person made a bird, and all the birds were really different. It's like when we've invented the name, because we've seen the birds, and they were all different, like all the people that came, and each bird has
Beautiful.
something from the person who done it, and it was amazing to see, because like they are all different, like the people.
They are all
And then
different. Yeah.
and then we found a place. It's one of the main streets here in Novosibirsk. It's a cinema called Победа, which is victory in Russian. And like still there are there on the wall. and it became one of the places where people really like to take photos.
I'm
It's
sure.
like a new city
Absolutely.
attraction.
Yeah. And the birds that you created are, so the shape of the bird is cut out. So when the person makes the bird, it's kind of like how it works at the ruins in a way, because especially the birds are, and the animals, because you see the outline of the bird, and then it's installed right onto the concrete wall, or whatever the wall's made of, and the effect of the finished product is like a flock taking
Yeah,
off all at the same
exactly.
time.
Yeah, I really like the effect. And also for me, I've been thinking about it. It's like little sculptures. They also have this strange
Yeah.
idea that it's like a mosaic that is made of mosaics. Because each bird is a
Yeah.
small mosaic, and then you have a huge mosaic that is made of mosaics. So it's like,
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
And how beautiful that you brought the community, and the people that have never made a mosaic, and they made a bird, right? There's real power in that, of creating a project that is controlled enough that the person who makes their little contribution is successful, right? So you have enough rules involved, I'm sure, in how you made each bird that it translates in the whole, and the person feels good about their bird.
Yeah, but honestly, it was really free. Like, we had no rules. The
Oh,
only
you
rule
didn't?
was
Okay.
to put Tesseras into cement. That's it. It's like
Really?
you have to glue it properly. Yeah. Because
Wow.
like they had a lot of colors. Also, we had like a sponsorship for this project because there were two smalty factories that gave us smalting for this project. So we had like
Oh,
150 kilos of materials that were given for free, and like it was amazing because all this
that is.
project was it was a social project, so we didn't gain any money from that. So it was more about people coming, trying mosaic, finding their own way to express themselves. So there were no rules really, and that was the thing I loved the most because some people came to make mosaic for the first time in their life, and they succeeded. It's like it's amazing to see because each bird is beautiful, and
They are.
they're all different. And the people who done it are not professional mosaics artists, so I think it's great.
Absolutely. And what a wonderful gift to have all of that smelty donated for that. And you probably had all of the colors. I mean, that's amazing. I we were talking. I can't remember if we talked on camera or if we were talking earlier about the factories that make the smelty in Russia.
Yeah.
I've heard about them. And I did we talk about this yet on
No,
camera? I can't remember. Okay.
that's
It's been like this rumor of these incredible smalty factories in Russia, and I've never been able to get my hands on them because I can't purchase from Russia. I can't do that. But I knew that Verdiano has talked about them. He's visited Russia many times as an artist. He goes back and has gone back and forth over the decades, and smalty is such a an obsessive kind of material for us. It's where the color is, and we love it, right? So to think that there is smalty being made out there somewhere that I can't get.
understand.
I would love to learn more about those factories. I just don't know. I don't know anything about them.
For me, it was absolutely surprising when I came from Italy and I found out that in Italy we have the biggest amount of different smelting factories in the world. Like in Italy, there are 4, I believe, maybe 3, and in Russia there are 7 factories.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're
It's
all
big.
different. Each factory make different type of materials. Like some of them make pizzas, which are these flat, brilliant. Like in Italian, they call it brillante. It means the color is really beautiful, really cool. It's like it's shiny. So only one factory make those pizzas, and the other make it's more like smarty chrome in Soviet Union style. Have you ever seen Soviet mosaics? There are like in Russia they have like a lot of them, an old mosaic that were made during Soviet Union period, and they used different type of materials. So it's more like it's not glass; it's more like glass mixed with ceramics. So
Oh,
it's not shiny.
okay.
It's more. It's really different. So I think 5 of 7 factories make this glass ceramics. It's Martin. It's a bit
Wow.
hard to explain because like you have to see it, try to cut it to understand what the difference is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's the Echo Smelty that is
Excellent.
made with recycled material. Maybe it's kind of similar to that in a way, or it has some similarities. Maybe.
Apple smelt, no, they're different because they're still shiny. So you cut it and you see that it's glass. And this Russian smelt, they are not shiny. It's more, uh,
Matte. Matte.
yeah, yeah. So the color is different. It's like it's more like ceramic. Yeah. You have to see it once to understand the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll get to see it sometime at some point, possibly. So what you made the Charles Paul Verba portrait from was that
Yeah,
from
you can see
one
it.
of your.
Yeah, you can see in the portrait. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's the stuff you're talking about,
Yeah, yeah.
partly that he's made from. Okay, it's beautiful. I mean, the new, again, the nuance of color differences in the flesh tone is just incredible, right? One of my other favorite parts about that portrait is the collar, his white collar.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it has a lot of colors. Like I had a black and white photo, but I wanted to put some colors in it, because like for me, it's really interesting in mosaic to work with color. Like almost everything I do it has lots of colors. That's
Yes,
why.
it does.
And one of my favorites, multi-factories, I love them because they make 720 colors. So
Wow.
different shades. For me, it's amazing because they make all the gradients from white to black in any color.
Wow. And you can just order them or order those yourself from home. I mean, you can order and they come in the mail for you. That's great. When I first started making mosaic in the very beginning, it was it took me a while to even discover what smalty was because I wasn't trained anywhere. I was just, it was kind of right when the internet was becoming useful to regular people, like in the early to mid 90s probably. And I would just, back when we were learning how to search. You're much younger than I am, so this is this is when you were still a child, honey. But when I discovered smalty, they still didn't have American distributors. So you had to figure out a way to order through the Italian companies, and you had to do the math from the kilos to the pounds and the dollars to the euros. And it was so complicated and so difficult. And but in some ways that made it sweeter, because you had to really fight to get your smalty. And now, of course, you can just hit a button, and the distributors are there in America, and you can get all the colors, and it's not nearly as difficult. But I think the way that I came into mosaic that way, it made it this mysterious material that I wish that I could. I've been trying to get an American factory to take on the challenge of making smalty. I think it would be a wonderful thing, but. Anyway, enough about that particular thing. I want to talk also about what you're doing now, which I think is a big project surrounding the deepest lake in the world. Is that right?
Yeah.
The deepest lake, Baikal. Baikal. Yeah. And is that the one that you did the mandala from the trash mandala for?
No, it's the second time. Right now, it's the second time I participate in some art festivals at this place, because like they organize it almost every year. They invent something new, and the festival was called Eternal Art, because we took trash from Baikal Lake, from the banks. They were like volunteers who were coming to the lake, taking some trash and bringing it to artists. And that's how like the trash is eternal almost, because like it takes 1,000 years, for plastic to how they call it to
Break
vanish.
down.
Yeah, to break down. Exactly. And that's why the art made from this plastic is eternal, because nothing will happen to it. And it was the first time I took place at this festival, and I made a mandala. It was made from different trash that was found on the Baikal. And this year we started another festival. We are making an art park by the Baikal. And there are lots of artists. Like there are, I think, 20 or 30 artists who takes part, and they all make different media, different things. Some come to paint, some make some installations from wood, metal, other materials. And me and a group of mosaic artists from St. Petersburg, we came in June also to make some installations for this art park. So yeah, it was really interesting. Also because like to make something on by the nature, it's amazing. It's like a holiday. Like you come to work, but still you're in a beautiful place, like with all this tundra forest, the deepest lake in the world. It's so clean and so beautiful. And also in Russia, this Baikal Lake is really important because it's believed to have a special energy. Like it's a really magical place. And it sounds strange, but I feel it because like for this 2 times I came to this Baikal Lake, and each time my life changes after that.
Wow. Do you get in the lake? Do you put yourself into the water?
Yeah, it is cold. The temperature is around maybe 15 degrees Celsius, because like, I don't know how to put it in Fahrenheit.
That's cold. Yeah, that's cold.
It is cold. It is cold. Like the first time I came in June, and we're still wearing some winter coats because it was cold there. And I remember I took the winter coat off. I went to the lake. I put it back. So yeah, it's like even this getting into the water is magical now, because it gives you so much energy.
Very cool. Wow. So what's next? Are you going to be doing any other big trips like for Mosaic, or are you going to stay home and work there?
On Sunday, I'm going to Turkey for another Luminosis symposium. This year it's in Adana. Yeah. So there is another mosaic trip this year.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So that's close, not quite as far of a trip for you.
Yeah, it takes 8 hours far, so it's not that far. But still, it's so interesting to go, because there will be 12 different artists from all over the world. I'm not even sure who will come. So
yeah, they're always fascinating. I watch them from afar, and I usually know someone that's in one of those symposiums, if not a few people. So I'm always interested to see what gets made, right? Yeah. And that's a incredible place to visit, Turkey. My goodness, so much mosaic history.
Yeah, it is. And also, I believe the city itself has some mosaic history. Also, they have a smalti factory, which is important.
Oh, okay, another smalti factory.
Yeah.
So many things I don't know. Wow.
I've never seen it before. I have no idea how the smalti looks, but they say it's pretty good.
And did you say that's on Sunday that you go?
On Sunday.
Wow. Well, that's right. Yeah, I wish you a wonderful trip, and I hope I'll watch from afar on Instagram, as we all should, right? I think that is the best way to follow you. Instagram. You're pretty active, and all you have to do is hit. There's a little button at the bottom of your text, because you always write something interesting, and it says translate. All you have to do as an English speaker is hit the translate button, and it turns your Russian into English, and then we can read it.
It's really convenient nowadays. Yeah.
Well, I wish you luck on this next adventure, Adelaida, and I certainly hope that someday you get to make the trip to the ruins.
I hope so.
And
I
we
would
would
love to.
welcome you and with open arms, and I just would love to walk through and talk about all the mosaic with you. Yeah, it would be a dream for sure.
It's also doing for me. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Ruins podcast. A gentle reminder that all of these growing episodes are free to listen and sometimes watch, but they are one of the very few places right now that are capturing the magic of the mosaic world in podcast form. I have no team of tech assistants. It's all me muddling through the details every time I hit publish. I hope you will consider my newly adopted solution to keep them free, but with an option for you to communicate to me that you put a value on this work by buying me a coffee. You can click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description, or you can even load the app. Buy Me a Coffee is an app onto your phone. Makes it even easier. You can type buymeacoffee.com/Рэйчел Сэгер. It's so easy. And you can decide to do this today or next week. You can do it once, or you can buy coffees with every Ruins podcast that is meaningful to you. How you support and if you support is up to you. I'm just giving you a new way to do it. Thank you for being here with me as I keep digging for optimism. Some days with a hammer, some days with a shovel, and some days with a pen.